Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. So today we're going to be tackling a topic that's absolutely crucial for any business that's trying to not just survive, but really thrive in this crazy digital world we live in. We're talking about digital governance. And to help us unpack this whole thing, we're going to be diving deep into a fantastic source, Navigating the Future of Business in the Digital Age, which was just published last month.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. And it's not just another one of those buzzy tech phrases. Digital governance is really a fundamental shift in how businesses need to think and operate.
I have to admit, whenever I hear that word governance, my brain kind of zones out a little. It just sounds so formal and, well, honestly, kind of boring. So can you give us the elevator pitch? What is digital governance really all about?
Okay, let me see. So imagine you're trying to steer a massive cargo ship
Yeah.
right through a hurricane. But you don't have a rudder. That's kind of what it's like for a business, trying to navigate this digital world without digital governance. It's basically the framework that makes sure all your digital efforts, everything from your marketing campaigns to data analytics, they're all aligned with your big picture business goals. It's about managing risk, measuring your performance, and making sure that technology is actually driving you towards success, not just adding more complexity to everything.
Okay, yeah, that analogy definitely helps. So it's not just about having the latest and greatest tech. It's really about having a solid strategy for how that tech actually helps you achieve your business goals.
I like it.
Now, the article we're looking at today, it also mentions this pretty big shift in the role of IT within organizations. I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Traditionally, IT has always been seen as kind of like the support crew, right? They just keep the systems running in the background. But digital governance really recognizes that. IT is now a critical driver of both innovation and value creation. I mean, think about it. Think about how Netflix totally disrupted the entire entertainment industry. Their IT wasn't just keeping the lights on, it was the business.
Right.
It was enabling streaming, personalized recommendations on a massive scale. That's the power of IT in digital governance.
That is a huge shift. And I'm thinking about, some companies I know, would that even work in their culture? Do you think there's a risk of power struggles within companies as IT starts to gain more influence?
It's definitely a change in dynamics. There's no doubt about that. And companies definitely need to be mindful of that potential for friction.
Yeah.
But the reality is, in a world that's so driven by digital, IT can't just be stuck in the back office anymore. They need a seat at the table when it comes to actually shaping the strategy and driving the business outcomes.
That makes me think about this phrase the article uses, pervasive governance. It almost sounds like the opposite of having IT in a silo. So can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean?
Okay, so imagine a marketing team that's launching a new social media campaign. With pervasive governance, they'd have the guidelines and the access to data they need to actually assess the risks involved, in real time. And they can make adjustments on the fly without needing to go through a million layers of approval. So governance isn't just this thing. That happens at the very top of the organization. It's embedded in every level, every team, every decision.
It's like trusting your crew to navigate, not just barking orders from the captain's deck. But how do you keep things from becoming a total free-for-all? How do you make sure there's accountability in a system that's more decentralized like that?
That's where having a really strong framework is key. You need crystal clear roles and responsibilities. And a culture where people are held accountable. You're giving people the power to make decisions, but within a defined set of guidelines. And they have access to the information. They need to make informed choices.
That makes a lot of sense. And it kind of ties back to that idea of IT being more involved in the strategic side of things. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Now, another interesting point the article makes is about risk management and how digital governance really flips the script on the traditional way of thinking about risk.
Yeah, it moves away from governance of risk to governance for risk. And that's a really crucial distinction.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the difference?
So think about a startup that's developing some cutting-edge AI product. The governance of risk approach might say, avoid AI bias at all costs, but governance for risk recognizes that. Well, some bias is probably inevitable, so it focuses on managing that bias, mitigating it, while still reaping the benefits of AI innovation. So it's not about being reckless, but understanding that taking calculated risks is often necessary to achieve those big rewards.
This is making me think about my own approach to risk. I tend to play it safe, but maybe I'm missing out on some big wins because of that. What about you? Are you a risk taker?
I believe in informed risk taking, so it's about carefully assessing both the potential downsides and the potential upsides before you actually make a decision. And digital governance gives you that framework to make those decisions. And speaking of risk, we can't ignore cybersecurity and data protection in this day and age.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like every single day there's a new story. But a data breach or a cyber attack, it's actually pretty terrifying.
It is a very serious concern. And that's exactly why cybersecurity and data protection are now fundamental components of digital governance. They're not just IT issues anymore.
Right, because if you have a massive data breach, like what happened with Equifax a few years ago, it can completely destroy trust and expose the entire organization to enormous risk. It's not just about protecting the data itself. It's about protecting your reputation and your future as a company.
Exactly. And you know what? Weak data governance practices were actually at the heart of that Equifax breach. That's why having that strong framework, regular audits, vulnerability testing, and comprehensive employee training, all of that is non-negotiable. It can literally be the difference between weathering the storm and sinking entirely.
You're right. It's definitely not something to take lightly. So it sounds like digital governance is about creating a culture of awareness and responsibility when it comes to data security, not just implementing a bunch of technical measures.
That's a huge part of it for sure. And we're going to talk more about that cultural shift that's needed for digital governance to really work. In the next part of our deep dive, welcome back to our deep dive into digital governance.
You know, it's interesting how we keep coming back to this idea of culture. And the last part we talked about IT, moving from this purely technical role to a more strategic one. And now you're saying that a cultural shift is needed. For digital governance to really be effective, it seems like these two things are really intertwined.
They absolutely are. You can have all the best technology in the world, the most well-defined policies and procedures, but if your company culture doesn't embrace digital transformation and support those core principles of digital governance, it's just not going to work.
So what does that cultural shift actually look like? I mean, how do you actually get people to buy into this? It's not exactly the most exciting topic, you know.
You're right. It's not the most glamorous thing. But it all starts with leadership, the article we've been discussing. Navigating the future of business in the digital age, it really emphasizes how important it is for boards and executive teams to be actively involved in creating this new culture.
Right. It's not something you can just delegate. And forget about. But what does that active involvement actually look like?
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. It's about allocating resources, establishing those clear lines of accountability, and empowering people at all levels of the organization to make decisions that support that overall digital strategy.
Okay, so it's about enabling people, not just controlling them, which ties back to that pervasive governance idea we talked about.
Exactly, and it's about recognizing that mistakes will happen, especially when you're encouraging people to be more agile and innovative. But instead of punishing those mistakes, you create a culture of learning where you can adapt and improve quickly.
I like that. Fail fast, learn fast, and keep moving forward. It makes sense. But it's definitely a shift from that traditional play-it-safe mentality that a lot of companies still have.
It is a shift, but it's absolutely necessary if you want to stay ahead in the digital age. And this brings us to another really important aspect of digital governance, performance measurement. How do we actually know if all these efforts are working?
That's a great question. You can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, but if you're not actually tracking your progress and making adjustments along the way, you're basically flying blind.
You got it. The article really stresses the importance of establishing those clear metrics and key performance indicators to measure the effectiveness of your digital governance initiatives.
So what kind of metrics should companies be tracking?
It really depends on the specific goals and objectives of the organization. If you're trying to improve customer experience, you might track things like customer satisfaction scores or net promoter scores. If you're more focused on operational efficiency, you might look at metrics like process cycle times or error rates.
So you need to align your metrics with your overall business strategy. You want to see how your digital efforts are contributing to the bottom line.
Exactly. And it's not just about measuring those technical metrics like website traffic or app downloads. It's about understanding the bigger picture, the impact of digital on the entire business.
So for example, if you're a retailer and you've invested in a new e-commerce platform, you wouldn't just track the number of website visits. You'd want to see things like conversion rates, average order value, customer lifetime value, to really understand how that platform is impacting your revenue.
Precisely. And that's where data analytics becomes so crucial. Digital governance really relies on data to make those informed decisions and measure performance.
But it's not just about having the data. It's about actually using it effectively to gain those insights
Right.
and drive continuous improvement.
Exactly. Digital governance is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process of adaptation and evolution.
So you're always learning and adjusting your approach based on the data you're gathering. It's like if you're not evolving, you're falling behind.
That's a great way to put it. And it brings us back to the importance of leadership. Leaders need to create that culture that embraces experimentation and learning, where it's okay to fail fast and iterate quickly. Remember, the digital world is constantly changing. What works today might not work tomorrow.
I love that you keep bringing it back to the human element. It's easy to get caught up in the tech stuff, but ultimately it's about people, empowering them, supporting them, giving them the tools they need to succeed.
I couldn't agree more. So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Digital governance is not just about technology. It's about leadership, culture, and that commitment to continuous improvement.
It's about recognizing that digital is no longer just a separate function. It's woven into the very fabric of how we do business. It's the air we breathe, and we need to figure out how to thrive in this new atmosphere.
Well said. Now, in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some practical steps that businesses can take to start implementing these digital governance principles. So stay tuned.
All right, so we're back. And we've explored what digital governance is, why it's so important, especially in this digital world that's changing so fast. But now I really want to dive into the how. Like, where do we even begin with this whole thing?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It can feel pretty overwhelming, to be honest, like trying to climb Mount Everest without a map or any gear. But luckily for us, the article we've been looking at, Navigating the Future of Business in the Digital Age, it actually lays out some really practical steps to get started.
Okay, perfect. I'm ready to pack my metaphorical backpack and start this digital governance climb. So what's step one?
You know, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but before you start making any grand plans, you really need to take stock of where you're at right now. So take a good hard look at your existing digital assets, your systems, your processes, your capabilities.
So it's like taking inventory of your current digital landscape. What tech do you have? What data are you collecting? How are you using it all?
Exactly. It's also about understanding your current approach to governance. Even if it's not super formal, you probably have some structures in place already. So ask yourself, how are decisions being made about technology? Who has access to certain data? How is risk being managed?
And this assessment, it shouldn't just be an IT project, right? Because digital governance touches every single part of the business.
You're absolutely right. This needs to involve people from across the organization. Marketing, finance, operations, legal, everyone has a role to play.
Okay, so once you've got a clear picture of your current situation, what's next?
Time to create that roadmap. This is where you outline your specific goals for digital governance, the key initiatives you're going to focus on, and the metrics you'll use to track your progress.
So it's about taking those high-level goals and turning them into a concrete plan. So, for example, if a company wants to improve customer experience, they would map out specific projects to do that, like maybe revamping their website or implementing a new CRM system.
That's it. And don't forget about those metrics. How will you actually measure whether you're improving that customer experience? Maybe it's through customer satisfaction surveys or online reviews. You need to define those upfront so you can actually track your progress and make adjustments as needed.
Right. It's about setting those measurable goals.
Yeah.
And having a system for accountability. Now, when it comes to this roadmap, is it a one-and-done thing? Or is it more of a living document?
Definitely a living document. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be adaptable. Remember, the digital landscape is constantly evolving, so your roadmap needs to evolve along with it.
It's like that saying, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. You got to be prepared to adapt based on what you learn as you go.
Exactly. Another crucial element is building the right capabilities. So that means making sure you have the right people, the right processes, the right technology to support your digital governance initiatives.
So let's break that down a bit. What does that actually look like?
Well, it might involve training your existing employees to develop new skills or hiring new people with specific expertise in areas like data analytics or cybersecurity, or maybe investing in new tools and platforms to help streamline your processes.
So it's not just about the tech. It's about investing in the human side of things as well.
Absolutely. It's about fostering that culture of collaboration and communication where information can flow freely across the entire organization. Remember those silos we talked about? Those are the enemy of good governance.
Yeah, it's like that game of telephone we used to play as kids. By the time the message got to the end of the line, it was completely different.
Exactly. Everyone needs to be on the same page, working together towards those shared goals. And that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, communication and engagement.
I have a feeling this is where a lot of companies struggle. It's one thing to have a brilliant plan, but it's another thing entirely to get everyone on board and excited about it.
You're telling me communication is absolutely crucial. You need to be able to explain those goals, those principles, those benefits of digital governance to everyone in the company, not just the leadership team.
Because if people don't understand why it matters, they're not going to buy into it. They need to see how it connects to their work, how it benefits the company as a whole.
Exactly. And it can't just be a one-time announcement. You need ongoing communication. Keep people updated on the progress, the challenges, any changes to the roadmap.
It's about creating that sense of ownership. Everyone needs to feel like they're part of the process.
That's a great way to put it. Digital governance is a journey, not a destination. It requires continuous effort, adaptation, a willingness to learn and evolve.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
But as we've been saying, it's an investment that's absolutely essential for any business that wants to not just survive, but really thrive in this digital age.
Well said. And, we've been talking about digital governance within companies and organizations, but it's kind of fascinating to think about how these same principles can apply to our own personal lives.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. But you're right, we're all navigating our own digital lives these days, managing our online identities, our data, our devices. It's a lot to juggle.
It is, so maybe there are some lessons we can learn from digital governance and apply them to those personal digital lives. How can you create your own personal digital governance framework to navigate this world that's becoming more and more complex?
That is a really great question to think about. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into digital governance. It's been a truly fascinating conversation, and I hope you've all gained some valuable insights to take back to your own digital worlds, both professionally and personally. Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and keep diving deep